Okay, I assume the technology is working now, so I just go for it. So, hello everyone. My name is Antti Piilola, and I am a second-year doctoral researcher at University of Helsinki. It is a pleasure to be here and be able to share with my plans for constructing a paradigm of ineffability. This is my first time participating in a philosophy conference and giving a presentation, and I'm a little bit overwhelmed. Not just because this is an unusual situation for me, but also because of my chosen topic, ineffability. That, by its very nature, could even be called absolutely unusual. Before going forward, as I'm going to use the term a whole lot, let me state what I mean by ineffability. Ineffability is defined in terms of what is, in principle, outside the reach and realm of concepts. Ineffable is unsayable and unknowable. The topic and the difficulty that comes along with it was chosen by a kind of necessity. Since my PhD project and main research interests are centered on philosophy of mysticism, where ineffability plays an essential role. Whether one denies or affirms ineffability for a philosopher of mysticism, it is very hard to completely ignore. For quite some time, I was quite comfortable with the concept of ineffability in mystical context. It was great at affirming the unique nature of mystical experience, separating it from ordinary experiences, and in so doing, validating the approach to mysticism that I have adopted as part of my PhD research project, namely that of essentialism. In literature, it is sometimes equated with perennialism, but that one comes with a lot of extra baggage that I won't be able to carry with me all the way to conclusions. In order to explain my reasoning behind my attempt to construct a paradigm of ineffability, I need to backtrack a little bit. During my long search for an academic home for my PhD project, I realized that philosophy of mysticism was somewhat of a niche topic within philosophy of religion. After finally finding the roof over my academic head in the University of Helsinki, during my first year as a doctoral researcher, I decided to explore the philosophical landscape of philosophy of religion to better understand the place of mysticism within it. Basically, I wanted to find out why mysticism was so often hiding or hidden in the periphery of philosophy of religion. I am not sure if I found the correct answer to that mystery, but what I did find was lots and lots of ineffability. The subject matter of philosophy of religion and the questions philosophers of religion ask are prone to lead the inquiry beyond this ordinary world and towards the absolute, towards God, or whatever one places at the very summits of the metaphysical, epistemological, theological, or even existential hierarchies, or at the foundation such hierarchies require in the first place, or whatever kind of philosophical structures might contain the answers to our philosophical inquiries. And I became aware that higher we climb these hierarchies, or the deeper we dig, the bigger the questions we ask, the more likely it becomes that one begins to see traces of ineffability within the answers. Sometimes it is given the center stage, like in the doctrine of divine ineffability and closely related doctrine of divine simplicity. But sometimes it appears to be hidden under the guise of a mystery or covered by the divine attributes that I at least thought contained traces of ineffability in them. And as I see it, all it takes is a one drop of absolute ineffability to saturate the whole concept with it. The point here is, I found a whole lot of ineffability. Finding all this ineffability pretty much everywhere I looked long enough led me to turn and focus my attention towards research on ineffability. And to my surprise, I soon found out that ineffability was not exactly the trendiest philosophical topics either. Closely related and at times synonymous topic of apophaticism seemed to be in the similar or same spot, at least within analytic philosophy. Continental philosophy did seem to have a bit more to say about the unsayable, but the point was still clear. In order to finish my PhD project that explores the ways in which mysticism and mystical experiences can partake and provide content to philosophical discourse, I would need to gain better understanding of the role of ineffability in philosophy of religion. And if and how these different notions of ineffability converge with the ineffability I had apparently become a bit too comfortable with within philosophy of mysticism. And this is what I'm trying to accomplish with my attempt to build a paradigm of ineffability. There are three main components to the paradigm. First, I want to explore whether ineffability, that is often, if not always, seen as a negative term, conveying a lack of something, could be turned into a positive one, so that ineffability would be an affirmation of something. One avenue of philosophical approach I will take here is to see whether the philosophical work done by the concept of ineffability could somehow substantiate it. For example, it can be a challenge, that is, work as a challenge, to Christian and any theistic conception of the divine. Doctrine of divine ineffability is, or at least can be, a declaration of the absolute unknowability of God. How can we say that something ineffable, completely unknowable to us, could also be personal and something we can form a relationship with? How can something ineffable be the object of worship and source of divine action? In other words, ineffability and apophatic conceptions of God can be difficult to correlate with biblical faith. On the other hand, it can also be an answer to challenges to conceptions of the divine, most notably through its relation with the doctrine of divine simplicity and creatio ex nihilo, where ineffability can be seen as a safeguarding the transcendence of the absolute of God. In this context, ineffability becomes necessary to our understanding of the divine, something that makes absolute absolute and something that makes God God. Second component of this paradigm building project is to find a point of convergence between three meanings of being ineffable, both words capitalized. Now, looking at literature and research done on ineffability and apophaticism, one can find a lot more than three meanings for the ineffable. But I am trying to condense everything that can be absolutely ineffable under that one term with different senses or meanings that can converge. If I had included slides in this presentation, there would have been only one slide with that written on it, being ineffable. And considering the topic, I guess it is actually rather proper that I didn't take the time to learn how to create slides, and there is just a blank spot where the being ineffable could have been, probably there. This way, I can gesture towards being ineffable without there being nothing there. Being ineffable. That is actually something I seem to be able to and want to name every philosophical project I choose to work on. As a side note, this includes the working title of my PhD thesis, which is Being Ineffable, Mystical Experience and Its Place in the Philosophical Discourse. And this paradigm of ineffability I am sketching here will be essential to the completion of my PhD project. So, three meanings of being ineffable. First meaning of being ineffable is as a state of affair or state of being. The general meaning ineffable takes when we say ineffability of something or something being ineffable. Second meaning of being ineffable is as a mystical experience. I will not go into the typologies of mystical experiences and their validity, but as an example, we can find this meaning of the being ineffable in the unitive, monistic mystical experience that is particularly relevant to Christian mysticism, where the mystic is being ineffable, united with God, the absolute ground of being awaiting at the end of the mystic's quest. And that takes us directly to the third meaning of being ineffable, as the ineffable, as God, absolute, ultimate reality, whatever might be awaiting the philosopher at the end of his or her quest for wisdom and truth. That is, if it wasn't being ineffable, something absolutely unknowable that no truth can reach or cover. So that is two components of the paradigm of ineffability covered. First was to try and turn ineffability into something affirmative. For example, through the philosophical work it can do as a challenge and as an answer to challenges to the conceptions of the divine. Second was to include and hopefully find a point of convergence between the three meanings of being ineffable just covered. One component remains, and this I believe is the most important one. The first two components of the paradigm form an argument for ineffability. They attempt to validate the concept and reveal its philosophical shape, if there is one to be revealed. The third takes that validation and turns into an argument from ineffability, and asks and hopefully answers the question of what the paradigm of ineffability allows us to see and do. In other words, after reaching the ineffable, or at least its border, and realizing that there is no going further, argument from ineffability has us accepting and embracing the being ineffable, stopping at that final terminal of knowledge and turning away from that which we can't talk about, and in so doing, see the philosophical landscape and the paths that guided us to the unknowable, and, to use somewhat of an apophatic expression, see what is before us in the light of the darkness behind us. Now, this requires that all the three main components of the paradigm are in place, and that the paradigm is stable, a coherent whole that allows questions that we want to ask. And in my case, that would be the research questions I am asking in my doctoral dissertation. But ineffability is not exactly ordinary building material, and should allow for some very interesting configurations that could be of interest and use far beyond my own project I am building it for. And this leads me to one final point I want to make. Paradigms, in order to do the work required from them, limit the scope of research just as they sharpen it. By defining being ineffable and its three meanings the way I presented here, will likely prevent me giving philosophical space and place to some less absolute approaches to ineffability. Any talk on those will have to happen outside that paradigm. Point is, there is always a philosophical price to pay. And considering the subject matter of philosophy of mysticism and philosophy of religion, the price can be quite high indeed. Our conceptions of the divine, of knowledge, of truth, of being, of existence, of ineffability, will not only pave the philosophical paths we choose by adopting such conceptions, but they will also place fences around them. If, beyond all these definitions and paradigms, there is a destination where all our philosophical paths lead to, I can tell you one thing about it: it is being ineffable. Also, there is one admission I want to make, and I waited this close to the end of my presentation on purpose. Paradigm is a big word, and ineffability is such an elusive philosophical building material that the paradigm of ineffability might very well be doomed to collapse. But even then, it would be failure of the paradigm that leaves us with an ineffability view, that accepts that very failure and uses it to sketch another line around the metaphysical contours of the being ineffable. Now, I think I have run out of both time and words, but I would like to welcome comments of every kind regarding my talk, my paradigm building project, and any related matters. I am specifically interested about the roles which ineffability and apophaticism and also mysticism play in various philosophical endeavors. Are they a challenge or an answer to one? Besides questions and comments here and now, if any, I am also interested and open to further correspondence on any of these topics in the future. Considering the 2,600 or so year precedent, we will not run out of things to say about the unsayable anytime soon. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'm opening our discussion. Do we have any questions, comments?
Thank you for your very interesting presentation. My name is Jesuit from this university. I have a question. I see it. As far as I understood you equated at the beginning of your presentation ineffability and knowability.
Unknowability, yes.
Unknowability. So I think the issue is not so simple. And as an indication to my further discussion, I want to quote one remark made by Wittgenstein in philosophical investigation. Compare knowing and saying. And then two examples. How many feet high Mont Blanc is? You can very easily say if you know it. How the word game told that maybe the climate sound is ineffable, but it's knowable. How it relates to your view? Because I think it's so more complicated than you take it in your view.
Okay, thank you for that. There's very little things that are simple in ineffability, and this might be a little bit of a cop-out, but what I have in mind is absolute ineffability. I mean, the ineffability can be often scaled. It is putting the strong ineffability, weaker ineffability, if we just lack the words we have to express something, or if what is being ineffable is completely outside the concept. It's not a being among beings, what we are trying to say. Like I said, it can be safeguarding the transcendence. When it takes that role, I would have to look deeper into Wittgenstein's words there, how to say, but the point is that in that role, it doesn't allow anything creaturely to pass the gap of ineffability.
Thank you. Other questions? Are there any questions online? Okay, I have one more question.
Okay.
I ask from this. Okay, what is happening is that we have people online, so to ask questions, we will need to come here, yes, to the stage. Yes? Yes, to ask the question. Okay, so can I ask the question from this place or should I go there? Okay, so my question is, when we see the thinkers who are advocates of the apophatic theology, like Plotinus or Origen or Gregory of Nyssa or this kind of thing, they are very strong, especially Gregory of Nyssa is really strong, that we don't know, we are not able to talk about the nature of God or to know the nature of God. It's not only in our earthly life, but also in the eschatological future. We will also never know the nature of God. However, they spend like volumes writing about God. So my question always is what they are talking about. And they say that they are talking about God's energeias, not the ousia, God's ousia. However, most of them are Christians, so there are doctrines and dogmas. So the question is whether doctrines and dogmas, they refer to God's energeia or phenomenon, or they really go to the nature of God. But if they go to the nature of God, then you can say something, for instance, about Christ. Okay, so this is my question.
Yeah, okay, that is very good question, and again, very difficult to answer, and I probably don't have an answer that fully satisfies that. There's a whole lot like ineffability is a paradox. There can be like it's a lot of work done on it is exactly on this paradox. When we say God is ineffable, we are already saying something, and somehow it creates a paradox. And one of the ways which I guess responses have been, we slice the God a little bit, make some part of it understandable, some part of we can talk about, we have God and Godhead, or something like that. But yeah, I'm not completely against the option that this can be done, but this is so easy about when you're talking about absolute ineffability. I'm going to hide behind that one again. And like I said, if there is a little bit of that absolute ineffability in God, then it saturates the whole concept. But it's a different matter when we can, of course, say a whole lot about God, ineffable God, and mystics, like the names you mentioned, they are very eager to talk a lot. And we have I want to drop the paradigm again. They make the rules, what they can say and how to say, how to speak about the ineffable. And like I said, it's been going for 2,600 years. I'm counting from the moment when that one brave soul got out from Plato's cave and saw the sun and tried to explain what he saw. So it's an ongoing project.
Any other comments or questions or criticism? Not? If there is nothing online, so thank you very much.
Thank you.
So I will ask the second speaker, Katarina from the University of Paris. Yes. And we're still within the context of apophatic theology. Yes. And there's a quite complicated title of your presentation. I will try to read that. It's a lamb Elohim or some intermediate result of ongoing monkey trial. Is contemporary Christian philosophy condemned to the apophatic? So we're really continuing the previous presentation somehow.
Frankly speaking, not really, because I think we would have tried to be absolutely different science without real relation to theology and theological contentions about literary theological science, that is to say, negative, positive, and it is relative to philosophy. So, in different sense.
Do you need any help here?
Okay, so I will have the possibility to change lines myself. Oh, thanks. Yeah, it's okay. Thank you. As everybody knows, every philosophizing begins with asking questions and wondering. Yeah. Louder. Okay. Every philosophizing begins with questioning and with surprise. So one day, walking in the quarters near the Museum of Contemporary Art in Paris, I found this very interesting, strange, and a little bit sacrilegious, painting, half sculpture, representing Monkey Christ. So I was very surprised, and I started investigating this question just for myself to find the explanation to this phenomenon, to this artistic phenomenon at least. Where from comes this metaphor, and in what context it may function. But before to begin, I would like, because the topic is very strange, so I would like begin with some kind of disclaimer. What is this talk about? It is not about monkeys as such. It is not specifically about philosophical debates on evolutionary theories between secular scientists and Christian theologians. It is not about theistic anthropomorphism or zoomorphic pantheons. It is neither about divinization nor about the possibility to reconciliate Palemism with Thomism. It is rather about numerous and far-reaching anthropological implications of one metaphysical metaphor involving humans, apes, and gods. So everything began in 4th century before Christ with Plato quoting Heraclitus, but we can say in advance that philosophy of Plato compared to the pre-Socratic philosopher, it was like Christianity compared to Hebrew Bible. So there was a major change in vision of what is philosophy and the birth of metaphysics, of philosophy as metaphysics. So Heraclitus has nothing to do here, I think. So Plato attributes to him these quotes. Probably it was his quotes, but
I'm sure that the context was, in the meaning was very different. So, two quotes. The most beautiful ape turns out to be ugly compared to the race of men, and in relation to God, the wisest man will appear an ape in wisdom, beauty, and everything else. Although the Bible doesn't refer to monkeys or apes in allegorical sense, it develops its own mimetic symbolism in regard to humans, God, and God the Father and God the Son. And patristic literature, influenced by both Greek philosophy and Abrahamic religions theology, ends up forging a metaphor involving humans, apes, and God, in which man is a true image of God, while Satan, devil, is a false one. For example, two examples from Genesis and Colossians. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. And the second quote, the Son is the image of the invisible God and the firstborn over all creation. Diabolus est simia Dei. The devil is God's ape, famous formula of Tertullian, quoted by St. Augustine in De Civitate Dei, Satan, ape of God. So the metaphor, this metaphysical metaphor, was born, and then it begins to function in culture, in theology, in philosophy. Double metaphor, homo imago Dei versus diabolus simius Dei, leads to the idea of ultimate judgment and as a final divinization of man through the Christ's sacrifice and his ontological unity with God while being man. The influence of Platonism in all the more noticeable is this metaphor. That is to say that what I previously said about Heraclitus and Plato, there was a major transition in worldview in general between the times of Hebrew Bible and Christian Bible and in times of Plato, of pre-Socratic philosophy, and when philosophy became metaphysical with Plato. And here there is a little linguistic interesting remark that in Hebrew Bible, B'Tselem Elohim, apparently it's not very clear. We have already discussed with one colleague here, but apparently Tzel, it meant in Hebrew just shadow, not really eidos like it was translated by Philo the Jew, image, shape, appearance. Then, what is interesting, the famous paradox, third man argument of Aristotle, and it seems that Latin Catholic Church and Eastern Orthodox churches suggested their theological solutions to this problem formulated by Plato first in Parmenides, and then by and also by Aristotle in Metaphysics and Socratic Refutations. Interestingly, they suggested, it seems to me that they suggested some kind of theological solution in two different ways. For example, in Catholic interpretation, it is double man, divine nature of Christ being an additional origin point of the Holy Spirit, and another version of solution of this problem of universal and particulars, that is to say, infinite regress, in Eastern churches, Orthodox churches, in Palameism, was direct cooperation of divine grace with human will. So, respectively, filioque, synergia, participatory cooperation in hesychasm. Most interestingly, question in this context arises in connection with Darwinian theory of humans evolving from apes, contrary to popular belief that Darwinism being an extreme form of naturalism, like in Elvin Plantinga, who criticized Darwin for being naturalism. He quotes him that one quote in which Darwin is not sure. He hesitates, and he says that it is impossible that the monkey brain would be able of thinking divine and things like that. So he questions himself, his own theory. And but contrary to the popular belief that Darwinism, being an extreme form of naturalism, had the effect of undermining the foundations of creationism, one gets the impression that, on the contrary, his theory of anthropogenesis was inspired by purely Christian ideas of ontological, genetical, and phenotypical unity of the third man, this Aristotelian third man, impossible figure, with both upper and lower realms. With the only difference that in Christianity the metaphysical role of such third man between humanity and God is played by Jesus Christ, while in Darwinian model the apes are in the same position between So the apes take the place of Jesus Christ in Darwinian theory, where apes, monkeys. I think that Darwin took the model. He would not invent his theory of evolution if he didn't belong to Christian culture. So it seems to me that he took the model of Christianity, where the man, the divinization of humans passes through the figure of Jesus Christ. And in his theory, the place of Jesus Christ was taken by monkeys, by animals, by animals, and in their humanization, monkeys played the role of Jesus Christ. As one of the critics of evolutionary argument against naturalism by Alvin Plantinga, John Wilkins writes that Darwin's argument undercuts Plantinga's anti-naturalism and in fact replaces it with a global skepticism about the non-natural, and this is not self-defeating. Plantinga's argument is actually an argument against supernaturalism. So the resemblance of Darwin's ape to Jesus Christ in their role of Aristotelian metaphysical third man fits into a similar understanding of Darwin's evolutionist project. In his evolutionary model, monkeys, apes do not become a human equal in the Christian understanding of the divine essence of man. They only methodologically ensure the ontological unity of man with the lower animal world. But despite the numerous accusations of Darwin's theory of naturalistic anti-Christianism, oddly enough, science has not yet been able to find irrefutable evidence confirming the origin of man from a common humanoid ancestor with great apes. Therefore, there are still no reliable archaeological and genetical data which could make this burlesque illustration reality. So far, in spite of many interesting researches in recent years dedicated to animals, animal consciousness, thinking, communication, behavior, and genetics, both science and Christianity, even though for different reasons and with different arguments, remain in solidarity in their opinion about human uniqueness. From sociological, legal, ideological, political, psychological, ecological points of view, former and current battles around struggles about so-called monkey trials in literal and figurative senses are of great interest, since they make possible more or less objective study of rudimental social stereotypes, latent religious beliefs, unobvious cultural interactions and influences, unconscious scientific, philosophical, ideological convictions, collective psychological motivations. Some examples of functioning of this metaphor in contemporary culture. For example, on YouTube you can find very interesting things about monkeys, not about monkeys, but about functioning of this metaphor. For example, commercializing the metaphor devil, ape of God on YouTube for earning money, and there is even an expression, monkey equal money. Tertullian's ape of God transformed into Jung's trickster archetype. Orcs, goblins, and other fictional malicious humanoid creatures were copied from monkeys and exploited in games, movies, social media. And it is interesting, this archetype is very interesting because it combines both diabolic and divine. In his dual nature, half animal, half divine, his exposure to all kinds of torture, and last but not least, his approximation to the figure of Savior, Carl Jung. Last but not least, the approximation to the figure of Savior. There was a very interesting accident or incident in Spain when non-professional painter but devout parishioner Cecilia Jimenez, who had at that time 80 years old, was 80 years old. She tried to restore a painting which was the portrait of Christ. And she spoiled absolutely this painting, but there were many tourists who wanted to see it, so the city was very prosperous after that incident. But what is interesting that there were two alternative denominations of what she had done. This portrait was called by inhabitants of this town either Monkey Christ, either Potato Christ. And finally, Monkey Christ became more popular, and this is significant. His exposure to all kinds of torture. This video obviously was very immediately deleted from YouTube, but you see the torture of monkey. So there is something in collective psychologically, this metaphor functions in the mind of people. And there was one interesting commentary, barrel of monkeys, and one of users of YouTube said, I know in the drugstore in my childhood there were barrels of monkeys. So he made a relationship with this torture and barrel of monkeys. But it shows that there is something disturbing in the image of monkey because of this double nature of bestial, diabolic, and human-like. Also, very great topic, comparing black people to monkeys and all kinds of racism. Very interesting video. Girl plays with dolls, and white dolls are babies, human babies, and black dolls are baby monkeys. Why? It's not very clear. In movies, in cartoons, also this metaphor functions. All kinds of racism. For example, there was Turkish Muslim scholars who developed an inverse theory that Jews were cursed by Allah and some of them became monkeys. Very interesting example, very recent example, ridiculous but very representative in this sense, in this context. The advocate later letter of a group of scientists to the Kurd, of human rights, and to the World Organization for Health. They asked, they said that it was urgent need for a non-discriminatory and non-stigmatizing nomenclature for monkeypox virus. And we were discussing here why they did so, and one participant reacted in a very interesting manner. She said, it was irrespectful and offensive to monkeys. Yeah, no, to black people. And yes, logically, it is disturbing that they say it is offensive regarding black people, because it is latently racistic to think so. Monkey gods, Hanuman, Vanara, Sun Wukong, King Kong, and all other types. In the East, in Asia, it is different culture. In non-Christian cultures, apes and monkeys are far from being associated with falsehood, deceit, cheat, lust, devil, Satan, and various human sins. In India, Bali, China, and many other Asian cultures, they are loyal, courageous, wise, skillful, just and fair. However, on practice in Asia, in spite of existence of sanctuaries for monkeys, they are hated, abused, tortured, and exploited for purely pragmatic reasons due to the harm they bring to people in those regions. They are considered as rivals and potential source of income. Dramatic street performances and keeping them as pets for earning money on YouTube flourish. So some illustrations. Not to take a lot of time. Yes. So we could transform this B'Tselem Elohim in the image of human. What happened to theorizing human nature in Christianity happened in secular culture with monkeys, with apes, theorizing them as somebody on the way to humanization. In contemporary, and finally, why this question about apophatic? In contemporary Christian philosophy, is contemporary Christian philosophy condemned to be apophatic? In what sense? As Leon Brunswick ironically noticed, responding to Etienne Gilson in famous 1930s French debates, that in the very idea of Christian philosophy, the adjective radically negates the substantive. Unsurprisingly, the answer given by Christian philosophers like Elvin Plantinga, in sum, we who are Christians are supposed to be philosophers, much not rest content with being philosophers who happen incidentally to be Christians, but we must strive to be Christian philosophers. So taking into account the enormous importance of Christianity in our today's globalized civilization, as we have just shown on the example of Monkey Christ, a very complex allegory of humanity, in fact, in its search of what could be called divinization, probably the best position of contemporary Christian philosophers would be analyzing philosophically, that is to say, positively, cataphatically, in quotes, all these numerous and far-reaching, as I said in the beginning, anthropological implications which are being generated, have been generated and continue being generated apophatically, negatively, that is to say, not in a latent way, over centuries by Christian religion in different cultures and societies. Thank you for your attention. So if you have any questions, comments, I'm ready to answer.
Okay, so I'm opening the discussion. If you have any questions, comments, please.
difficult topic.
It's very fascinating. Yeah.
But very strange. I understand.
Okay, so I have a little closer. This is a part of your broader work. How does it fit in the kind of in the broader scale of what you are doing? I would be very interested.
I am very interested in yes. I am very interested in searching proofs, in finding proofs of human uniqueness. So for me, this story is about how human uniqueness could be defined. So if you want to know the context in which this painting sculpture attracted my attention and why.
Okay. So I have further question, if I may. I have further question. Okay, you refer to Tselem, to Hebrew Tselem, but there is also another term, demut, which is the likeness. I think there are similar words, really. But demut is interesting. This one refers to shadow or the shape or something like this. Demut refers to blood, let's say. It has this Hebrew root, DM. So the red, the earth, the Adam, and the blood. So it seems that it really goes into this kind of kinship that one may say. So on the one hand, we may be talking about a special position of human, uniqueness of human beings. On the other hand, we may be talking about some kind of relativity or being in relationship with the other levels of creation. How would you see that?
This question is very difficult because we have already discussed this question with my colleague. The problem is in studying Hebrew Bible that it is difficult to know which translation is correct and which etymology is correct. There are a lot of interpretations, a lot of translations. And as for French language, I can say where my interest comes from. It comes from the project of life, of all his life, of one French theoretician. I say theoretician because he refused to be called a philosopher, because he considered that philosophers, he rejected everything in philosophy what came with Plato, with Platonism. And the idea of firewall, the distinction, this radical major turn in 4th century before Christ, in theology of Abrahamic religions, as in philosophy with pre-Socratics and then with Plato. It comes to me from Henri Michanic, that is to say, from this person, this scholar, whose project of life was the 5th translation of Hebrew Bible in French language. Why he wanted to do that? Because he was his conviction was that Hebrew Bible was understood incorrectly, and he tried to make reader feel all the play of metaphors and etymological nuances in Hebrew Bible. But he was very criticized by many other scholars, so I don't know Hebrew, so I can't judge whether his experiment was successful, because I don't know if he translated it rightly or probably not.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Are there any more questions or comments? No, thank you very much. I think we need to take the water.
Good afternoon. I'm grateful I'm here. Due to strict time constraints, I will stick to the prepared text. Thank you very much. When I read the title of our conference, Christian Philosophy and its Challenges, I began to wonder what could be a challenge to Christian philosophy today. Sorry, I need some support. It's easier to answer the question of what the challenges are of philosophy in general. However, after much reflection, I came to the conclusion that for Christian philosophy today, in the field of social or political philosophy, it is challenged to provide an idea of the legal indissolubility of marriage, and hence to provide arguments for adopting such an idea. Therefore, the topic of my presentation will be the idea of legal indissolubility of marriage. At the beginning, I have to present some assumptions that I have made for the purpose of this short speech. First of all, my analysis will concern issues in the field of political, social, or legal philosophy, not the moral philosophy or ethics. Therefore, I analyze marriage primarily as a social institution that is represented in law and the political sphere. Secondly, when I talk about the indissolubility of marriage, I'm not discussing same-sex, polygamous, or group marriage. They are not important for the analytic undertaking. Thirdly, I accept that the idea of the indissolubility of marriage is an idea closely related to the vision of marriage rooted in Christian philosophical tradition. By this, I understood that on one hand, classical Thomistic thought and the understanding of natural rights, as understood by Thomas Aquinas, also a certain new Thomistic approach represented, for example, by John Finnis. On the other hand, the Christian philosophical personalism delivered from Karol Wojtyła, as well as the development of his thoughts proposed, for example, by Alexander Prus. Fourthly, I'm aware that the idea of the indissolubility of marriage is not a specific Christian idea. In today's presentation, I'm not so interested in justifying the idea of the indissolubility of marriage, but in the fact that within the framework of the understanding of the tradition of the Christian philosophy presented above, it is closely related to the idea of marriage as such. Could you help me with this presentation? Because it's not okay. My presentation will consist of the following stages. Let me start with a short description of the main contemporary legal solution relating to the stability of intimate relationships. Next, I will move on to a short discussion of Christian traditions and culture. Then I will discuss the relationship between legal solutions and the philosophical ideas, to finally indicate the importance of marriage as a social and legal institution for the constitution of society. In this context, I will argue the need to work out the philosophical and legal idea of indissolubility of marriage and to work out arguments for another form of marriage, which would be an indissoluble marriage. Since the second half of the 20th century, a creeping revolution in the social acceptance of intimate relationships has been observed. This is expressed in legal regulation or administrative decisions. The types of relationships that I will distinguish have legal grounds. I will not go into individual legal decisions because the typology presented is to constitute the background for further philosophical analysis. Nowadays, I would distinguish the following types of intimate unions, which have some legal consequences. First, registered domestic partnership. It is something more than cohabitation. Two persons, irrespective of their gender, could obtain a certificate confirming their real relationship. In this case, the political community is involved through an administrative procedure in order to confirm the real partnership of two people. The so-called domestic partnership registry was first established in 1985 in California. In Europe, similar solutions were introduced in France and Germany in Hamburg. This type of union has very limited legal consequences. For example, in various cases, it may offer the possibility of using the partner's social insurance. Second, civil union. This is a type of registered partnership that is fully formal. From the perspective of the law and the political community, people who are in such a relationship establish family relationships. Their civil status changes, as in a marriage, with the end of the real relationship. Such a relationship is not dissolved ex lege. For our analysis, the most interesting solution is the French Solidarity Pact. There is a permanent new form of regulation of intimate unions. This type of formal relationship was created to legalize same-sex partnerships. However, after just 3 years, same-sex union accounted for less than 50% of the Solidarity Pacts concluded, and now they account for a few percent by year. The last form is a marriage. It is a fully acceptable and legally regulated relationship based on the intimate relationships. It may be terminated with the consent of both partners, or due to the fact that one of them is found guilty by the court. It is important for philosophers that law is set in the context of a specific society. It represents certain ideas, not only social but also philosophical. In the case of the modern revision of thinking about marriage, this is the particular evident. In Christian culture and philosophy, we can identify two basic ways of looking at marriage. The first point of view, in which marriage is understood as an indissoluble relationship between a man and woman. Only within such an intimate relationship is sexual life acceptable. Such a vision is justified biblically and theologically. It has existed since the beginning of Christianity, and today it is represented mainly by the Catholic tradition. In the following centuries, in the development of Christianity, philosophy began to support the theological vision of indissolubility of marriage. There were mainly concepts referring to natural law, or nowadays also to personalism. The second point of view understands marriage as a contract that can be entered into but also terminated by both spouses. Marriage, which is understood in this way, was spread along with the Reformation and the development of Christianity in the Protestant tradition. In other words, marriage is another contract that we can make in our lives. In conclusion, we have two basic ideas about marriage. The first shows us marriage as an indissoluble relationship. The second as a relationship that can be dissolved. Now, I would like to discuss the relationship between the legal solution presented earlier and philosophical positions. We will constantly be interested in the problem of breakdown and indissolubility of the relationship, called marriage, which I understood is a socially acceptable form of intimate relationships. I also assume that the various legal forms represent some philosophical positions. In the case where a registered domestic partnership ends, the relationship is closely related to the real relationship and living together. When people stop living together, such a relationship ceases to exist. In the case of a civil union, such as the French Solidarity Pact, the union may end by visiting an office of one of the partners. In this case, a one-sided statement is sufficient to terminate the relationship. In the case of a marriage, the relationship may be terminated with the consent of both spouses reported in court or with a court decision on the guilt of one of them. Firstly, there is a legal or administrative reference to these relationships in some form by the political community, and secondly, the possibility of terminating each of these relationships is gradual. It is essential for philosophical analysis regarding these three types of relationships. Moving on to philosophical ideas, we first ask the question, can the two philosophical ideas presented earlier be implemented in the legal forms discussed? The simple answer is yes. Both marriages as a contract and as indissoluble relationships can be realized in all three legal forms. In the case of a contract marriage, it may be terminated in any of the three cases. Only the conditions for the termination of these relationships change. In the case of a marriage as an indissoluble union, the formal conditions for termination of such relationships are irrelevant. The idea of an indissoluble marriage doesn't assume that this relationship will end. The difference will appear when asked a different question. Do both philosophical ideas of marriage have their representation in the legal system? It will be found that the idea of marriage as a contract is represented in three legal forms, while the idea of marriage as an indissoluble relationship has no legal representation. The difference that appears in this case doesn't concern the reality of the philosophical idea. It concerns the social acceptance of such an idea expressed by the political community in the legal system. In my opinion, the philosophical tradition that recognizes marriage as an indissoluble relationship and which is largely a traditional related to Christian philosophy has been under the influences of some illusion. It has been assumed that the civil marriage that permits divorce also represents the idea of marriage as an indissoluble union. Unfortunately, this is not the case. In the context of Christian culture, marriage as an indissoluble union is only represented in canon law. Claire Chambers from Cambridge University talks about the marriage-free state. She is fighting for arguing against state-recognized marriages. But in the case of marriage as an indissoluble union, it happened many centuries ago. In the case of Poland, such a marriage is recognized only in religious communities, such as the Catholic Church. The question is whether marriage as an indissoluble union should be recognized by the state, and whether this should be a challenge to Christian philosophy today. The idea of legal indissoluble marriage challenge a Christian philosophy today? In my opinion, yes. Current social changes are so dynamic that the idea of marriage as an indissoluble union should also be legally represented. The legal idea of marriage that may end in divorce doesn't represent an anthropological vision that has its source in natural rights or Christian personalism. From the perspective of the philosophy of politics and social relations, the idea of legal indissolubility of marriage would optimize intimate relationships in the aspect of the relationship stability. Until now, there was only a vision of marriage as an only socially regulated and accepted form of intimate relationships. Over time, such a vision of marriage has been enriched with the possibility of divorce. In the last 30 years, registered domestic partnership and civil union, such as the French Solidarity Pact, have appeared. On the scale of socially and legally accepted forms of intimate relationships, there is currently a lack of optimal solution in the form of an indivisible marriage. In France, some of the Solidarity Pact transform into marriage over time. This means that such relationships want to strengthen their intimate relationship in a legal and social form. The next step could be a legal indissolubility marriage as optimizing the durability of such an intimate union. This is an argument in optimizing the durability of intimate relationships. From a political and social perspective, the argument from stability is also important. The existence of an indissoluble form of relationship will show couples what kind of relationship they decide on and what they can expect from it. The spectrum of possibilities will extend from cohabitation to indissoluble marriage. The difference that arises between marriage and an indissoluble marriage can play a significant role in making promises and in building trust and stability in the relationship. On the other hand, the stability of intimate relationships is essential for the upbringing of successive generations of members of a particular political community. It may also be relevant, for example, in indicating couples who will be able to adopt children. The stability of intimate relationships may also affect the stability of the development of a particular society and even its survival. Building a society based on the idea of stable and indissoluble relationships can also have an impact on demographic stability. Therefore, I'm convinced that the idea of the legal indissolubility of marriage, which could influence the emergence of a new additional form of marriage, is a challenge not only for Christian philosophy today, but also for the philosophy of politics and law in general. Philosophers can elaborate, deliver, and argue for such an idea. Thank you for your attention.
Challenge for theology, not for philosophy.
Mm-hmm.
What is your opinion?
Okay. I'm aware of this concept in theology, but we can find some ideas. For example, the last book of the Alexander Proust, One Body. In these books, Proust show us the relationship between men and women as a similar like Karol Wojtyła as a stable and indissoluble relationship. And when we talk about the marriage, I think this is the same. Maybe okay, I've agreed. This is the theological problem, but in philosophical categories. Terms, we can find this idea. But from my point of view, what is the problem? The problem is because this is just the theory, but some theory have different representation in a system of law. For example, civil union and marriage as a social institution. But from my point of view, when we talk about why I focus on the Pact of the Solidarity, this is a very interesting situation because when we talk about civil union, for example, in Denmark and probably in UK too, this concept appeared, for example, in Denmark in 1989, and that was the transition point to achieve the same-sex marriages. And 2012, this civil union disappeared from the law. But in France, civil union is another form of relationship between people who is recognized by the community too, like a marriage. But the stability of these relationships is different than marriage because, like I said, they could terminate just one-side statement. And in my opinion, this is the some kind of possibility and challenge to show people that we could create the idea of legal this indissolubility of marriage. Because in France, people have to decide we won't get civil union or we won't get a marriage. Okay? But when we will have another form, they will have to decide we want to get a civil union, like a solidarity pact, or we will get a marriage, or we will get a indissoluble marriage. Okay?
Yes, I know. I need to come in front of the laptop. So the question is, are you referring only to the religious kind of relationship between men and women, or do you refer strictly to the Christian or Catholic marriage? Like, is it like about a religious relationship as a base for family structure, or it's like a firm relationship between men and women, and it doesn't make any difference. It doesn't make any difference for like whether it is related to religion or not. Mm-hmm. Okay? Get my point?
This is a more complicated question for me to explain, but the marriage, as a marriage, isn't just the religion relationship. I'm not sure, but around approximately 13 years ago, Professor Czachorowski wrote a book about the indissolubility of marriage in philosophy, in philosophical thought. So it isn't just the religion problem. But coming to your question, the first part of the question, women and men, this is more complicated. In Poland, in our political community, it's not a problem because we have just one legal proposal. Marriage is just a myth. But in my speech, I wanted to focus only on this problem of durability, this relationship. It could be terminated or not. I can imagine, for example, in UK perspective, or from USA perspective, or from Polish perspective, that will be different solutions. Because in UK we have the same-sex marriage, but the problem stability is the same. But what I've found, when we think about the marriage, we just think about just relationships between, just two people, me and somebody, or more people, but just 2 people, okay, monogamous proposals. But I think in discussions about marriage, we forgot about the role of the community. Because could we, from the religious point of view, I made a promise to my fiancée. I want to be with you to the death, and I will take care of you. Is it enough to be a marriage? And I will do this. Yes, but we need the community. Okay, in the Christian context, we need the God. Okay, but we need the community to put to the concept in the marriage, and that is the reason why I think about the legal indissolubility of marriage, not just the philosophical idea of the indissolubility of marriage.
Can I continue asking more? Yeah, but you need to come here. And thanks to Jakub, we know where to stand.
Yeah, okay, so I get everything you say, but the question returns, if we change marriage, like, to some kind of relationship, which is free of Catholic God, or like, just imagine, I don't know, the marriage in Indian society, okay? And like, you have in this idea that you are together until death, you have community, you have some kind of religion, and are you arguing, because you propose 2 arguments from optimalization and the other one, are you arguing for this kind of marriage as well or not? So this is the question. And the second question is like an addition ad vocem. You know the novel Madame Bovary?
Sure.
So look there, you have the idea of not same-sex marriage, like you have men and women. You have all the rituals around it, yeah? Okay, it is Catholic, but it's not really about God, is it? And you have community. Like Madame Bovary cannot freely go to rendezvous other guys. So you have all the conditions you mentioned, and still it's far from the happy family, is it? Okay.
Okay. The first answer, the answer for the first question is yes. I will argue that outside the Christian tradition, that we still should arguing for this indissolubility of marriage. Okay, this is the first answer. And in the second situation, I'm aware that some idea can change people and relation between people, but it is the perspective. This idea gives the perspective, and when we put to the system of law legal, the legal idea of the indissolubility marriage, we have to how to explain in Polish, ustosunkować się. We have to refer to this idea, this norm. Because when I decide just married which could be determined and the indissoluble marriage, I have to explain my spouse, future spouse, why I decide this form, not another one. And I think that could be the morally justified. It could be morally justified. And that could be support this kind of relationship. I told about this situation in France when the civil union transformed to marriages, because after a few years they get married, because maybe they were about what they want to do together. They want strength this relationship. Okay.
Yes, please.
Talking about marriages and so on, compared to in this theological context, we could probably bring this idea of indissolubility of marriage to even broader and extent by comparing it to relationship of God with His people in Hebrew Bible, of God with humanity in Christianity, and in Judaism, in Christianity, and in secular society, contemporary secular society. So, what is possible and not possible in Jewish society? Is it possible to divorce in Jewish society?
I don't know.
It would be interesting to see probably there is a parallelism between the conception of relationships of God with humanity, with His people, because in Hebrew Bible you have God, He who makes covenants, alliances, pacts with His people. So it is possible to break this pact theoretically. And in Christianity, it is parental, it is another kind of relationship because people are children of God. So it is impossible to refuse this relationship. And in secular society, again, you have even large, broader liberty to choose to conclude covenants and pacts or agreements and so on, or to break them. So probably there is something in this parallelism. I don't know, it's just
of course, when we focus only on the religion context, we have to relate to the God. And
even there is a metaphor, a beautiful metaphor of church conceived of Christ.
Mm-hmm.
So,
I don't feel, and I don't have enough knowledge about this. And my speech was from the perspective of field of the political and social philosophy. But in this way, I can't explain. But I would like to say about the Hugo de Groot, and which he's a philosopher of law, and his view of the natural law, not rights, law. He said, "Pacta sunt servanda." So we should we have to realize our promises, for example, our rights. So I think it could be not compare, but it could be linked with this idea. And I think it's not just only the theological idea or from the background of the religious background, with the religious background, like the earlier question from the other culture, but it's just in general to the develop of society, develop to the relationship between people, intimate relationships.
yes, of course. For example, in France, with tax, you mentioned tax. Yes, of course, in France, where the state plays a very important role in social life, it was very logical to suggest such form.
But why I started thinking about this? Because I mentioned about the Claire Chambers from Cambridge University, and in her opinion, she wants to put away the marriage from the public sphere, put to the just only to the, for example, to the religion sphere. She wants to, okay, if you got married, go to your religion community and get married. But we as a state, as a, I don't know, political community, we don't care about this. Okay? Because from her point of view, from the feminist point of view, or liberal, based on the liberal principles, the marriage, such a marriage is an oppression institution. Okay? But I think when she can say we can put away the marriage from the public sphere, I think opposite. We could get the more optimal this relationship. And what is the role of the state? The state or political community could be a guarantor of these promises, just the promises. Thank you very much.
Any other questions, comments? Yes, please.
Okay.
Yes.
So, with the indissoluble marriage, what are you looking to achieve? So you talked a little bit about child and society. There's a few questions, so it's depending on what your response is to that. Sorry, so what do you think would be the benefit of an indissoluble marriage? It was kind of, you've talked around some of those aspects, but what would it be that if you have two people together that have, it's like when you get married, it's for life. So how can law?
At the beginning, yes.
but this is my point. How, if you then in law make it that there can be no breakup of that marriage, how is that of benefit to anyone?
To choose this kind of marriage, yeah? This,
yeah. Because at the beginning, nobody wants to get married and
get divorced, yeah.
And get divorced. So I'm just wondering how, in a spiritual term, you can suggest that you've made those commitments before God, and yet if there's a legal boundary to that, why that would make that more sustainable?
This is important question, but we could ask the political community which would like to choose this form of marriage. But from my point of view, the first, this is give a new perspective in moral position to be for kind of an eternal relationship between these two people. And the other one, of course, at the beginning, we don't want get divorced. I think it's a normal. But after years, this kind of marriage, during some troubles in this relation, could I'm not sure could support to taking care of this relation. Not just from it could be some kinds of support from the state, I don't know, maybe some privileges, but the main point is that these people, two people, will have to be pushed to, I don't know how to put, they could rethinking maybe something, his activity, maybe starting take care of this relationship, because from the psychological point of view, and from the, maybe when we take some sociological data, we can find that after a few years, these relationships in general, just go worse in a few ways. But in this situation, that could be the I don't know how to say. It could be some not game changer, but something what could change their. Sorry for my English. Okay. Attitude to this relation. Changing to the attitude to this relation. When I think about this situation, I think about a little bit about the Indian culture, because when divorces is going down, the families try to support this relationship to be stable, and in this idea, in maybe civil, in this idea, state could support this relationship. Why? Because they will not have possibility to terminate this relationship, and they will have to find some solution in their troubles, for example, or some problems. But because we are human, and when we have the problems, sometimes we just don't want to take some effort to omit this problem or resolve, find a solution, good solution. And I'm not sure, because it's an idea, but I think just when we could give this legal idea, legal indissolubility union, legal indissolubility marriage put to the legal system, it could be some assumption to changing some thinking about the relationships, because they could see this possibility. Because from my point of view, okay, we talk about the marriage, but when we ask, for example, teenagers, I work with teenagers, okay, do you want to get married? Oh, maybe, but that will be to the end of your life. I have to rethink this. And when we put this idea, they, before this decision, they will have to rethinking what they want to do in this relation. I'm not sure I answer your question.
I think this might be the time to stop our discussion. This is fascinating, and it really causes many questions. And we can go down to drink tea or even something stronger. Having coffee, and we can discuss further this topic, which I think is very interesting to all of us. I have a few questions as well. So yeah, the one announcement is like